Well, this evening, I'm glad that you're here. I'm so excited to welcome a special guest with us. I know many of you have heard of the Red Cross, right? When there's a disaster, the Red Cross rolls in and does their thing, and they provide aid, they provide help in crisis moments. Well, I don't know if everyone knows that there is another organization that does similar things, but in the name of Jesus. Not just doing kindness, but kindness in the name of Jesus, spreading not just the love of Jesus through word, but also in felt needs as well. And so I'm so thankful that we, in our fellowship, we have an organization like Convoy of Hope. And so tonight we've got a special guest, Steve Pulis. Would you join us up here? I'll have you introduce your wife to us as well. But we are so glad you're here tonight. So here you go.
Thanks, Pastor. Hey, thanks. Great to be here tonight. I think I'll just... Thank you, Lonnie. Appreciate that. Yeah, I can just do it that way. All set. So wonderful. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for being here on a Wednesday night. Let me start by introducing Melissa Pulis, my wife, the wonderful, yes, glad to have her come with me as well. So we've been married next month. Somebody guess. Okay, I'm going to come to the youth here. Somebody guess how long we've been married. 10, I hear in the back. Well, that does depend on how old we are, and I'm not having you guess that. So, good point. What do you think? 23. Okay, getting closer. Next month, 26, 16, 21. Next month, February 5th, 32 years. Yeah. So, anyway, were you thinking that? There you go. You're on the button there. But wonderful to have my wife. We've got two sons, 126, 122, Nathan and Colin as well. And they're out of the house now. Well, pretty much. Colin's back for a year after just graduating. But we love being empty nesters. So anyway, yes, we've loved being parents and love this stage too and love youth. But anyway, it is fantastic to be here tonight to get to be with you. We're part of, really, what's happening is our missions convention, right? Sorry that everything got canceled because of the weather. We'll see what kind of snow we get in the next few days with Saturday night. But I know Sunday is going to be another opportunity to talk about what God's doing around the world. And so thank you. When you give to missions, it helps Convoy of Hope and all our missionaries around the world for the Assemblies of God share Jesus with people. And so right up front, I appreciate that. Thank you. We couldn't do what we do without your prayers, without your finances. So when you give through Convoy of Hope, you're reaching people around the world for Jesus. Tonight, I want to do really two big things while I'm speaking. We're going to look in Scripture and talk about Joseph, and then we're going to come back. I'm going to share a little about what God's doing through Convoy of Hope around the world. But first, when I say Joseph, how many of you ever heard of Joseph before from the Bible? See some hands. Good. Okay, good mix here. Okay. When I say Joseph, what do you know from the Bible about Joseph? We're going to kind of tell the story as a group for the next few minutes. So it doesn't matter what age you are, but if you know something about Joseph, maybe think near the beginning of his life what we might know. It doesn't have to be in exact order, but we'll kind of work our way through and see some things we can pull out of that and see what God did in Joseph's life. And if you don't know that much about Joseph, you get to learn a little bit about him tonight. I would say, if you want to, when you get home, Genesis, about chapter 37 through the end of the book, through 50, those chapters outline Joseph's life. And it'd be a great place, maybe before you go to bed tonight, open up Genesis 37 and just read that first chapter. And maybe tomorrow, read the next one. And kind of over the next couple weeks, you could read all about Joseph. Because we're not going to have time to get all the details. We're going to hit some highlights. So, I've given you some time to think. Somebody throw something out. What do we know about Joseph? Mixed family. What do we mean by that? You're exactly right. Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a big family, right? Absolutely. Somebody over here? So, yeah, he was not the oldest. So, yeah, it was kind of mixed in there through on what we're going here. Yep. Somebody else? His brothers sold him into slavery. Yes, and everything we're talking about is going to be important. That's kind of a big one. Right? Can you imagine being sold into slavery by your brothers? I mean, some of you probably can. You're like, I don't know about my brother. But so anybody know why Joseph's brothers got to the point where they actually sold him? Now, real quick, give you a couple of things, and we're going to so be thinking about that because I want an answer to that coming back. But Joseph lived about 3,500, maybe 4,000 years ago, somewhere in that range. That's a pretty big range, but somewhere in that range is kind of where he lived in the Middle East. So we're going to be talking of kind of the Middle East, what today we think of as Israel, Palestine, over to Egypt. That's kind of where this happened. And he was sold into slavery, literally, like you guys have probably studied in history. There's this group of traveling people, like I picture camels, that kind of thing, that are working their way through the land, the Midianites, and as they're traveling through, his brothers are so upset with him, they actually sell him to these guys as they're marching through the land. Okay, so back to our original question. Why would your brothers sell you to a traveling caravan if you're Joseph? Green-eyed monster, jealous, right? Somebody said favorite? Yeah, dad's favorite? Is that what you said? Yes. And why? Okay, so he's dad's favorite because... Yeah, well, that's where it started. So if you don't know, there's Abraham, there's Isaac, there's Jacob. You kind of heard those names in the Bible, and then Joseph is one of Jacob's kids. So, but Jacob had too many wives. I mean, one's wonderful. More than that's a problem anyway around. It's just not the way God created it. But Jacob didn't do that. So he had more than one wife. Joseph's mom was the favorite, as we're talking about here. So that caused all kinds of problems. Why else? Well, how did his dad show that Jacob was his favorite? Yes, that's what we're really getting at here, right? Yeah. So one thing, dad's favorite, dad showed that because of mom gave him this coat. The Bible just describes it as many colors. Obviously a pretty cool coat because it stood out. He got better than all of his brothers. But what? Yes, he did, which is why he shared his dream with his brothers, right? So, anybody remember kind of just brief picture what those dreams were? Yeah. So there were cows and there were grain heads, right? And so with that, the grain heads all bow over, and they end up not only do all the brothers bow down to Joseph, but mom and dad do too. So here's what I'm going to say here. Sometimes when you know something somebody else does, it might be wisdom to not share it with everybody, right? I mean, there's just some times, and this was probably one of those times looking back on Joseph's life. So he had these dreams, told his brothers about it. They already knew his favorite. Midianites come through. They literally sell him. Now, first off, his brothers almost kind of kidnapped him. I mean, they were going to kill him. They throw him in a pit. Before they could kill him, one of the brothers was like, hold it, let's not kill him. Midianites come through and in a way keep him from being killed. They sell him. They drag him down into Egypt. What happens in Egypt? He's a slave, absolutely. So he goes from being kidnapped, sold into slavery, and he's in a slavery of a ruler, kind of a governor, basically, is what this guy's, and his name was Potiphar. So Potiphar is the ruler. He's a slave in Potiphar's house. So it goes from bad to worse. Not only are you sold to traveling guys, then you're sold into somebody who, now you're a slave in this household. What happens in Potiphar's house? It keeps getting worse from there. Right. Potiphar's wife. So Potiphar sees that really Joseph works pretty hard and really does a good job of managing things. So because he works well, he puts him in charge of the entire house. And things they're prospering. Potiphar's doing all right. Joseph's doing a good job managing, kind of stewarding everything that Potiphar had in the house. Until one day when Potiphar's wife says, ooh, I kind of like this Joseph guy better than I like Potiphar. Let's get together. And so literally Joseph comes in doing his normal business. It's just Potiphar's wife and Joseph. Potiphar's wife basically propositions him. Hey, let's have sex. Joseph says, no way, I'm out of here. And literally in that moment of temptation, when he could have given in, he runs out of the house. So one of the things I want to talk about is, man, when you're tempted, run. Sometimes there is no better action than, this is going to be bad for me. I know I shouldn't. Instead of getting as close as I can, sometimes I want to see how close can I get to that without actually doing what I shouldn't. Joseph did the exact opposite. He ran as far away from it as he could. We all know when those times come. We all know when we're getting too close to something. I'm going to challenge you to follow Joseph's advice and run. Now, in this instance, Potiphar's wife actually grabs his cloak. She's holding on to it. So when Potiphar comes back, she falsely accused Joseph of trying to violently rape her. That's what the Bible says. Hey, he was trying to rape me. So Potiphar, what happens here? Next point of the story goes from bad to worse to worse. Yes? Yes. Arrest Joseph, and where does Joseph end up this time? Prison. So you go from your brothers hating you, being sold, now being sold from the Midianites into slavery. You're doing okay in here, and now you get falsely accused of, and you did the right thing, but the wrong thing is told about you, and so you end up in prison. What's amazing when you read through this story, even in prison, the guy who was over the prison said, everything that Joseph does in prison takes care of itself. It's doing pretty good. Kind of like Potiphar's house. So I'm not worried about anything that happens in Potiphar's part of the prison. Or in Joseph's part of the prison. He actually kind of managed or led that part of the prison. If I'm in prison, it's going to be like, what happened to my life? This is terrible. God, where are you? I'm just mad, bitter at everybody. Joseph apparently used those organizational skills he had to kind of lead that part of the prison. So as he's in prison, a couple other things happen. We talked about dreams earlier. Anybody remember a couple other dreams happened? Anybody remember who had dreams while they were in prison with Joseph? Cupbearer, right. And a cupbearer is typically the guy, he drinks the drink and tastes the food before the king or before Pharaoh. So if it's poisoned, he dies. Not a job I would want, because there are usually a lot of people trying to kill the king, right? So, but the cupbearer and the baker are out of favor with Pharaoh, with the king, and so they're down in prison too. They both have dreams. They tell Joseph about the dreams. God gives Joseph the interpretation. Joseph says, hey, cupbearer, you're going to actually end up back in the king's service. So the baker goes, oh, well, if that's the case, let me tell you about my dream. And Joseph says, you're actually not going to make it. And sure enough, boom, cupbearer back up to the king. The baker ends his life sentence right there. He's killed. He's gone. So the cupbearer says, Joseph, because you knew my dream, because God showed you that, when I get back to the king, to Pharaoh, I am going to remember you down here. Remember the good work that you do. I'm going to tell the king about you. Basically, you got an in. I'm going to get you out of here. There's going to be a pardon coming in Joseph's name. What happens next? He totally forgot. Doesn't remember him at all. Imagine, sold into slavery because your brothers hate you, sold into slavery into Potiphar's house, accused of something you didn't do, injustice happens to you. You're now in prison. In prison, you finally have your way out because God gives you the interpretation to a dream that comes true, and you share it, and then you're forgotten. I don't know how Joseph kept going. I don't know what you're going through tonight. I don't know what life looks like for you. Probably in this size of a room, there's a lot of people going through some pretty tough stuff. I don't know if any of us are going through that. It's like there's always maybe somebody going through something a little bit worse. I'm not trying to minimize what you're going through. It's still difficult and still hard. But sometimes when we read about people in Scripture that nonetheless stayed true to God, it gives me kind of a little bit more, okay, I can make it tonight. Okay, I can try tomorrow. Okay, if somehow Joseph was able, after all of that, and then being forgotten, there's hope. He thinks he's going to get out, and he doesn't, totally forgets about it, and then, okay, he still followed God. Then God somehow helped me with everything that I'm going through. In time, Pharaoh actually has a dream, and all of a sudden it clicks. I knew a guy that told me about my dream back when I was in prison, and after that, you called me back up here, and he said that was going to happen. Pharaoh, get the guy. Joseph comes up. Now, imagine, there's some cool things in the Bible, and we're skipping over a lot of the details, but the one part that I like about this story I am going to throw in, they actually take Joseph, and they have to shave him, they have to clean him up. Can you imagine how dirty, grimy, you talked about a beautiful smell, and how our prayers are that aroma to God, and how that, we put on cologne, it fills the room, smells good. I'm sure there was a stench around Joseph that was the opposite smell. And so the Bible actually says they cleaned Joseph up, shaved him out, new clothes, so that he could be presentable before the king. Just one of those little details I like to throw in there and think about it a little bit. So short version, he goes back. Pharaoh tells him his dream. He said at this point, and he interprets the dream for him. He said there are going to be 7 good years, and we're going to have abundance of crops. We're going to get the right amount of rain, right amount of soil. Everything's going to be good. Then there's going to be 7 years of drought and famine, and everything's going to be bad. And the 7 bad years are going to be a lot worse than the 7 good years. And so if we don't take and store the extra that we produce in the good years, we're going to run out too soon in the bad years. And so Pharaoh, knowing that interpretation is on and seeing the wisdom in Joseph's life, again, he's done it in Potiphar's house. He's done it even when he was in prison. And so by learning, by using that skill set that he had, by organizing, by planning, by being faithful, even in prison where it was difficult, Pharaoh says, I want you to run everything. I want you to take the 7 good years. When we've got extra crops, I want you to build storehouses. I want you to keep it. We get into the 7 bad years. We're going to have the food to feed everybody because you're the guy that's going to put the plan together. God gave you the dream. God can use you to do that. So now we get to the part of the story, kind of the end piece, where the very beginning circles all the way around. This is what we've been telling the story all the way along, because who did we leave back in the very beginning of the story? Yeah, Joseph's brothers, Jacob, his dad, all the wives, all the people, they're back in Israel. Joseph's now gone through all this up, down, terrible, forgotten, up again, high, in Pharaoh's house, leading everything, this saving plan of how we're going to get through the good years and then get into the bad years. The 7 good years come through. He's saving stuff back. We get 2 years into the bad years. 2 years in, 5 years to go. Joseph's family runs out of food. Nothing. I mean, they've been farmers. They've had flocks. They've eaten it all. There's nothing. And Jacob hears, hey, there's food down in Egypt. Okay, why don't you guys saddle everything up, take the last that we've got. We got some stuff we can trade. We still have some money. We have this and that. Take the best that we have. And this is our last chance. Go down to Pharaoh and see if we can get some food in Egypt. Find some of that food, trade everything we've got, bring enough food back so we can live. There's a lot of details that kind of happen in this part too, so I really do encourage you. Genesis 37, read a chapter or so every day or two for the next couple weeks. Get through that story. Read all these details I'm skipping over because there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in there. Because the brothers come down and they go back and they come back, and that's a whole thing. We're not going to take time for today. But as they come back down the last time, they've gotten food. They've got to come back down for more food. All of a sudden, we get to that point when Joseph really can't stand it anymore. I mean, he knew the first time his brothers came who they were. They didn't recognize him because he looks totally different. Plus, they think he's been dead for years by now. And so we get to the point in Genesis, and I'm going to scroll down here, Genesis chapter 45, and I'm going to read for you verses 3 through 8. So listen along. This is the New Living Translation. And Joseph, his brothers are in front of him. They don't know who he is. He's the second most powerful person in all of Egypt, who at this point, if you've studied ancient history, Egypt is the most powerful nation on earth. They're it. So when you study how Egypt was the dominant world culture, they're the army, they're everything, that's going on right now. Joseph's number 2 in the entire kingdom. So here's Joseph's brothers scared to death. There's all this back stuff that's been going on as they've come back and forth, and they've had problems, and here they're back again. And as they stand in front of him, Joseph says these words in verse 3. I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. First question, is my father still alive? Wonder about his dad, wonder what's going on there. Don't have time to make any more comments about that, so let's continue. But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. I'm going to come back and read verse 4, but I love the way biblical writers write about what happened. I love the detail that they put in there. Imagine, put yourself in Joseph's brother's shoes for just a moment, and you hear, I am Joseph. They were speechless and they're stunned. Why are they speechless? Why are they stunned? I mean, they're stunned because, they don't think Joseph is alive, but why are they speechless? Yeah, exactly. So what's coming next for them? Yeah, right? I mean, we're not walking out of this place alive. I mean, I'm looking around to see the guys with the big swords coming through and making sure my head's still attached to my neck at this point because, right? I mean, that's the first thing you think's going to happen. Think about the way we treated him, and now here we are in front of him. They were stunned. They were speechless. Verse 4, "Please come closer," he said to them. So they came closer. And he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery. But don't be upset. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives." Read that line one more time. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. I'm going to finish the rest of that in a moment. I want to interject one thought here. So we're talking about missions. This is our missions convention. We're talking about what God's doing around the world to share Jesus with people. God sent Joseph, in a way, like a missionary, ahead to preserve not only the lives of his family, but all the lives of everybody in the area, because nobody had food. Nobody knew this was coming. Only God. God gives Pharaoh a dream. Joseph, God didn't put him in prison. God didn't sell him into slavery. That's what happened to him, though. God used the terrible things that were happening around him. God used that because Joseph was faithful. God sent him ahead, kind of like a missionary. He went to another country so that people could be spared, so that people could know who God was, this God who interprets dreams, this God that predicts the future. Why? Because God plans the future. That's what I want us to talk about tonight. You see it in Joseph's life over and over and over. God planned the future, and he used somebody like Joseph in the middle of it. Let me finish reading our verses here. Verse 5 says, "But don't be upset. And don't be angry with yourselves for selling me into this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives." Now let's pick it back up in verse 6. "This famine that was ravaged the land for 2 years and will last 5 more years, and there will be neither plowing nor harvesting." Verse 7, "God sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors." So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of this entire palace, and the governor of all Egypt. God plans the future. Think about Joseph. Think about how God uses things in human history, how God uses people, how God plans the future. Let me shift gears and talk a little bit about what God's doing through Convoy of Hope. Before tonight, how many people in here have ever heard of Convoy of Hope? Okay. Yeah, it's pretty good. All right, good group of hands going up. For those who haven't, let me tell you a little bit and a great introduction as to who we are and what we've done. Convoy of Hope's been around for 32 years. Before that, our founder, Hal Donaldson, was actually a pastor's son. When Hal was 12 years old, he had 2 brothers and a sister. There were 4 total siblings in the family. He's the oldest. And Hal's father was headed to a church business meeting. When do you guys have your business meeting? Kind of coming up? Yeah, so I thought since it's that time of year, our church is getting ready to have their business meeting. You get together and talk about the business for the year. Everybody votes on the budget, those kinds of things. So Hal's dad's going to lead their business meeting. The babysitter was late in coming to the house to watch the kids. And so they actually loaded everybody up in the back of the car. They're driving to the business meeting, and as they're pulling out of the neighborhood around the corner, they see the babysitter come late. So they turn around, babysitter comes back in, babysitter comes in the house, kids go in, and Hal's mom and his dad head off towards the church business meeting. On this second trip, as they're going, a drunk driver runs in the car, kills Hal's dad. And his mom is devastatingly injured. Hospital, physical therapy, never fully recovered from the injuries that she had. So as news began to spread, obviously the police officers are there. Police officers come to the house to find out the babysitter, the siblings, the 4 kids that are there. And the church began to gather because he never made it to the business meeting. They're all at church. So people began to come to the house. told the story before, not sure why it's quite so emotional tonight. But as the police gather up on the porch of the house, there's people in the yard, kids are behind him. He says, is there anybody here who'll take this family tonight, these 4 kids? Otherwise, we'll have to take them down to the police station. It's night, figure out, what to do. And a young couple in the back raised their hand, said, we'll take them. They thought it was temporary, thought it was short term. They lived in a single wide trailer. They already had 6 people with them. So they bring on 4 more people into the trailer, into the house, thinking it's going to be short term. As months went by, Hal's mom gets out of the hospital. She moves in with him into the trailer. And this family literally raised Hal and his brothers and his sister, the 4 of them. And Hal will talk now about the shame that he felt, being the one who always had the hand-me-down shoes that had holes in them when he got them, being one who was always on school lunch program, being the one who everybody knew, not only the story, but he didn't have anything, and how difficult that was growing up. And I share that story because years later, Hal is a journalist, and he goes to write the stories of Mark and Hulda Buntain in India. While he's there, they said, would you like to meet Mother Teresa? Have you ever heard of Mother Teresa before? So, yeah, most of us, some of the younger generation, Mother Teresa was a lady who lived in Calcutta and just took care of the poorest of the poor and lived among them like that. And Hal's like, well, of course I want to visit and meet Mother Teresa. So as he goes to meet with her, and he's kind of asking her some questions, but he said very quickly she turned it on him, and she's actually asking him questions. And one of the questions she asked him was, young man, what are you doing for the poor and suffering? And he said, it's not a very good idea to lie to Mother Teresa. So he said, well, actually, I'm not doing that much. And she said, everybody can do something. And so he went back, and he lived in Northern California at that time, near Sacramento. And I've heard his wife and him share how they had $300 in their savings account and checking account. That was all the money they had in the world, which years ago was actually even more than $300, sounds like now. They took all of that money, bought groceries, went to an area where there were actually some migrant workers that were coming through that just didn't have much, just needed some help. And so as they began handing out groceries to do what they could to help, and pointing them to the Assemblies of God church, which was right there in the area, because how's the Assemblies of God minister, pointing them to the church and connecting them to Jesus, God began to grow what became Convoy of Hope. And that's a short version of kind of the history of how we started. But God turned a tragedy, drunk driving accident that was not the purpose and plan and the perfect thing that God wanted for their lives, but allowed it to happen. It happened, not that God caused it, and something terrible that happened. God turned that into a heart. He took a terrible situation, kind of like Joseph, turned that into a heart that said, man, I know what it's like to not have anything. I know what it's like to not have hope. I know what it's like to not be sure about a lot of things. I want to connect people who are hopeless. I want to connect the vulnerable. I want to connect the poor. I want to connect them to Jesus. I want to provide the need that they have, but I want to connect them to the church. And so now, 32 years later, I heard Hal just this last fall say Convoy of Hope shared Jesus with 350 million people around the world. We've delivered 1.5 billion with a B dollars worth of goods to people through the church around the world. I don't even know what that number is. I mean, billion, I don't even know how to describe that. That's beyond my capacity to kind of understand what that means. But God plans the future. And so one of the main things, I want to focus just the last few minutes that I'm talking about Ukraine and about how Convoy of Hope's had an opportunity. We're in 40 program countries across the world, meaning we have ongoing children's feeding, feed 639,000 kids every school day. We help women who don't have jobs find a career, be able to support their families. We help farmers in agriculture, give them basic agriculture skills and help, which can increase the yield of their crops 3 and 4 times in a lot of the countries that we're in. And so we, through the church, want to help entire communities flourish. We want to help families thrive. It's always done through the church. Church is our starting point. Church is our ending point. Everything we do is through the church. It's volunteers in the church that lead all of our programs. We're all about what God can do through the church. And so Ukraine, we're all familiar with the war that's been going on for about 3.5 years or so there. And we were doing things in Ukraine, doing things in the borders in the countries around Ukraine. When the bombs started falling, we began to say, okay, God, what can we do? How can you use us? What are you doing with Ukraine? And as we're working through the churches, we began to realize that 800 to 1,000 churches have been devastated during the war in Ukraine. So we began to rally around the churches. We actually initially sent warehouses that we rented in Poland. And so we'd send trucks out from there. It got pretty dangerous as we were doing that. So people would bring their trucks into us and get stuff. But as we were shipping our initial food into Ukraine, we were taking blankets because it's cold in the winters like it is now into Ukraine. As we're delivering that to the churches, people come to the churches to get the supplies that we were having. Here's a video from about 2 years ago. You can start that about 1.5 years into the war. This, you can read along as to what's been happening. This is actually one of our delivery vehicles.
Давай. Пошел. Сзади так. Кажуть, що без там, щоб прилетілося туди. Ну, головне, що гітара на місці, аби ще вона ціла була, не провіряв.
Ось такі продуктові наборчики. Паста, рис. Дуже дякую всім, хто долучився. Видаємо по списку наданих міської ради. Всім дякую.
We've continued to work through churches just like you saw there, continuing to help people throughout the entirety of the war. The very beginning of the war, we had some generators, and you can see the photo up here now, donated to Convoy of Hope. And so we began to pre-position generators in churches, not sure exactly how they were going to be used or what we were going to do with them, but just felt like, okay, someone's donating some generators. Let's get the generators out in the places that they are needed. Now, the thing about Ukraine is this isn't a country like places I've been in Africa or Latin America where you just see poverty. This is not generational poverty where people, these are middle-class families, cities and towns that look like Union or Washington or St. Louis. The largest nuclear plant in the world is in Ukraine. So this is you and me. This is normal life is what Ukraine is like, yet now you've got drone strikes like you just saw. You have entire houses, churches destroyed, entire communities, and all of a sudden they begin to go after the power grid. When you have no electricity or no power in an entire community, the generators that were placed there began to provide the power that they needed. Power for the vulnerable areas, those close to the front lines, people who didn't have power for those that are disabled or for the elderly. The generators provided medical care at hospitals and at clinics for the sick. It allowed churches to become the only charging hub where families could bring their phones, their other communication devices. They could charge them up. The only way they could stay in communication with other people, family members, and those around. In the cold of winter, mamas brought their babies to the church. It was a warming station for heat. In some places, literal light in communities that are up for people who are in spiritual darkness. We didn't know what God was going to do with these generators, but God plans the future. These churches became the center of the community because of this activity that was going on around them. Through that, we had one pastor tell us when the war first hit, all 300 people in his church all left. They've losing everything. Russians are coming in. What do we do to get out of here? They all fled across the border and were gone. He said after a few months when people, things kind of, I hate to use the word stabilized because there's still drone strikes and everything else going on, but when things kind of became unevenly, dangerously stable, some people began coming back. So as people begin coming back, because the churches have the generators, because the churches are the hub, people begin coming to the churches for the clothes, for the blankets, for the food, for everything that Convoy of Hope is supplying to them. And this pastor who had 300 people leave now has 400 people, brand new, different, attending his church. And he called us to say, help us disciple all the new people that are coming in here that don't know Jesus, that are just kind of figuring out what this is. My staff's still gone. They left with everybody else. We don't have volunteers. We need help with all the new people that are coming into the church. It happens over and over and over in the country. Gerald Dollar is our Assemblies of God world missionary that's there. As I close and get ready to move us into a time of prayer, here's what Gerald Dollar said about what's going on. He's been in Ukraine for 20 plus years. He stayed through the war to help people. He said the government was not mobilized to do this kind of work during the war. He said the Orthodox Church, which is the biggest church in all of Ukraine, that's kind of the main, a lot of the people attend the Orthodox Church. He said the Orthodox Church didn't have a network to do this. We said the Assemblies of God Church, the Pentecostal Church, the evangelical churches. Those are the ones who were mobilized and really fed the country. So there used to be a lot of stigma, a lot of skepticism about going to an Assemblies of God church in that country. But that quickly disappeared as our churches were the ones that began to meet the need. He said, we now have a reputation. That's where you go for help. The wars brought people by his words, tens of thousands onto the campuses of churches that would never have stepped into the property of a church. He said, I can look out at the people in the auditorium, and 1 year ago, none of these people would have been here. The people I see now are all a result of the aid and the ministry of the church during the war, and those believers who were in the church have now immigrated all over Europe, starting churches. God plans the future. God can use a war that he's not for. He can use immigrants that are forced to flee and move throughout Europe to spread the gospel, to start churches, to share Jesus with people. General Superintendent in Ukraine, that's the highest Assemblies of God leader for all the pastors, was at a meeting of all the other Assemblies of God leaders for Europe. He said these words, churches are growing, children's ministry is growing, youth ministries are growing, and discipleship, all growing. He said, thanks to Convoy of Hope, our hands have never been empty. You see, compassion starts conversations about Jesus. Compassion gives us that open door to say, yeah, I'm meeting a need. Yeah, I love you. Yeah, why? Because God. Because God loves. So thank you for what you're doing to not only help us in Convoy of Hope, but all the other missionaries around the world. Last things as we move to prayer, as in November 2025 in Ukraine, Convoy of Hope served 7,277,541 individuals. 65,884,872 meals in 3,973 communities in Ukraine. We've been on the ground since the war started. We've got a long-term plan when the war ends to continue aiding the church and helping the people that are there. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know God plans the future. So, what can God do through you? We're in a missions convention, so there's a couple of things. How can God use you to pray for Convoy of Hope? Pray for missionaries around the world? How can God use you to love people around you, in your home, in your school? How can God use you to give this Sunday, weather permitting, Faith Promises, where we say, what can I give this year? My wife and I give to missionaries around the world to help. And you're going to be challenged. What can you do this year to reach somebody that you may never get to talk to, but because God sent somebody ahead, like Joseph, through them, you can help them share Jesus with people that need Jesus around the world. I don't know all the details of what next, but I know God plans the future. For Joseph, life didn't always get better. Life in Egypt actually seemed to get worse when you thought being sold to Midianites was the worst thing that could happen to you. Slavery, falsely accused and forgotten, but God used it all because God plans the future. And God plans your future. I said it at the beginning, I don't know what you're going through tonight. but God's with you. When injustice happens to you, when there's gossip about you, when unfair things happen to you, when life doesn't turn out the way it should or you want it, God is with you just like he was with Joseph. And God will use that even though he's not for it, even though he didn't cause it. God will plan the future. God will take those things and work them out for his purposes. So my prayer for you tonight is, what's your place in God's mission? How does God want to use you with what he's doing around